Dolls can be creepy, and as depicted in a plethora of horror films released throughout the decades, they can supposedly even play host to evil spirits. But what if I told you the origins of the ideas behind movies like Chucky may not have been fictional at all, but instead based in truth? You're watching Ghoulish Good Nights, and tonight we delve into the horrifying truth behind Chucky, the haunting of Robert the Doll. In the early years of the 20th century, a one-of-a-kind handcrafted doll found its way into the possession of a young boy named Eugene Robert Otto, gifted by a servant who worked for his family. This extraordinary doll, created by the renowned Steiff Company in Germany, stood about 40 inches tall and was stuffed with wood wool, also known as Excelsior. Affectionately known as Gene, the boy swiftly grew attached to the doll, naming it Robert, and forming a bond that would endure for a lifetime and beyond. Gene's abode, now dubbed the Artist's House, stands at 534 Eaton Street, erected between the years 1890 and 1898. Within these walls, Gene, an artist and author, was presented with the enigmatic Robert the Doll, and their remarkable tale began to take shape. Despite its unassuming cloth-made appearance, Robert soon found himself entangled in bizarre and somewhat alarming events. A sense of unease settled on a fateful night when a 10-year-old Gene awoke to discover Robert perched ominously at the foot of his bed, eyes locked onto him. In mere moments, Gene's mother was roused from her slumber by her son's desperate cries and cacophony of furniture toppling in his bedroom. Frantically, Gene implored his mother to rescue him. As she finally forced the locked door open, she found a petrified Gene huddled on his bed, the room in disarray, and Robert the Doll seated calmly nearby. "Robert did it," Gene could barely whisper, a phrase he would echo throughout his childhood when confronted with mysterious, unsettling, or destructive events. But was it truly Robert's doing? The inexplicable nature of how a seemingly harmless toy could wreak havoc in a child's room remains shrouded in mystery. Yet the enigmatic occurrences didn't end with that solitary episode. Gene's parents would often catch their son engaging in conversation with the doll, and to their astonishment, they would hear an entirely different voice respond. They claimed to witness the doll speak, its expression alter, and even catch glimpses of Robert darting up the stairs or staring out from the upper floor window. Robert's presence persisted through Gene's life, and after his parents' passing, he and his wife Anne returned to the family home, which is now a popular bed and breakfast. Gene felt Robert warranted a room of his own, placing him in an upstairs chamber featuring a window overlooking the street. Anne, however, was disquieted by Robert's presence, insisting that Gene banish the doll to the attic, away from potential harm. Gene acquiesced, but Robert was far from pleased. Visitors to the home soon reported hearing footsteps in the attic, the sound of pacing and sinister laughter. Neighborhood children recounted seeing Robert staring at them from the upstairs window, even mocking them as they journeyed to school. Alarmed by these claims, Gene hastened to investigate, certain that he had locked Robert away in the attic. To his utter disbelief, upon opening the bedroom door, there sat Robert, nestled in a rocking chair by the window. Gene's efforts to confine Robert to the attic were futile, as the doll would consistently reappear by the window in the upstairs room. Many speculate that the source of Robert's malevolence is rooted in the servant who initially gifted him to Gene, the same servant mistreated by Gene's parents. Some believe that she cursed the doll with voodoo and dark magic as retribution. This theory might explain the numerous chilling encounters people have experienced with Robert the Doll. But if true, wouldn't the haunting have ceased with the original owner's demise? As our story of Robert the Doll unfolds, it's fascinating to consider the broader cultural impact that tales of malevolent dolls have had on our popular cinema. The chilling events surrounding Robert may remind some of the popular horror movie franchise Child's Play, which began in 1988 and follows the terrifying exploits of a possessed doll named Chucky. Although the creators have not confirmed any connection, the similarities between Robert and Chucky's stories simply cannot be ignored. Both Robert and Chucky began their tales as seemingly normal children's toys, only to become enshrined in infamy as their stories unfolded. Each doll, with its own name and distinct personality, became the central figure in a series of unexplained and terrifying events. These similarities have led fans and scholars alike to speculate on whether the legend of Robert might have inspired the fictional Chucky, or if both are simply manifestations of a cultural fascination with the idea of the innocent turned evil. Child's Play took the concept to new heights, with Chucky becoming a symbol of horror. The franchise's success perhaps owes a debt to the groundwork laid by real-life stories like that of Robert the Doll. Stories that blur the lines between myth and reality, leaving us to wonder where one ends and the other begins. Whether coincidence or not, the story of Robert the Doll has undoubtedly contributed to the tapestry of horror lore from which Child's Play is woven, adding a layer of authenticity to the fearsome concept of a doll with a will of its own. Other films that delve into the eerie world of evil dolls include Annabelle, a spin-off from the Conjuring series, featuring a haunted doll with a sinister presence. Dead Silence is yet another example, where a ventriloquist dummy wreaks havoc and death upon those who encounter it. Both the story of Robert the Doll and films such as these share some striking similarities. A seemingly innocuous doll that becomes the center of bizarre and frightening events, unexplained occurrences that defy rational explanation, and a sense of dread that stems from the unexpected transformation of a childhood plaything into a sinister force. As the credits rolled on the first Child's Play movie back in 1988, audiences were left to ponder the origins of Chucky. The filmmakers Don Mancini and Tom Holland had unleashed a new terror onto the silver screen, but they remained tight-lipped about whether their creation was influenced by any true tales of terror. Yet, those who knew of Robert the Doll couldn't help but draw parallels. Robert's story was whispered about in the winds that swept through Key West long before Chucky ever brandished a knife. The doll's legend had seeped into the fabric of local lore, and perhaps into the collective unconscious of horror enthusiasts everywhere. Consider the evidence that fans and detectives of the dark, if you will, have pieced together. The possession. Both Robert and Chucky were said to house spirits within their stitched and stuffed bodies. Robert through some unknown enchantment, and Chucky through a ritual of voodoo spoken by a dying criminal. The companionship. Just as young Gene Otto found a friend in Robert, so did Andy Barclay in Chucky, each child unaware of the darkness that lurked beneath the cotton and felt. In the absence of a direct admission from the creators, the connection between Robert the Doll and Chucky remains a patchwork of conjecture and coincidence. Yet it's a patchwork stitched into the very heart of horror's quilt, a pattern of fear that repeats itself in stories told in hushed tones around campfires and on the silver screen. The truth may be as elusive as a shadow in a darkened room, but the story of Robert the Doll endures, a possible muse to the nightmares that dance at our heads long after we've outgrown our toys. Exorcism. For some, the idea of casting out demons or evil spirits is a necessary and effective religious practice. For others, it's a controversial and debated topic that can blur the lines between faith and superstition. However, regardless of where one stands on the topic, there are some stories that continue to captivate the imagination and spark discussion to this day. One of those stories is the true account of Anneliese Michel's exorcism. Her story is one that delves deep into the complexities of faith, mental illness, and the human experience, and has most certainly sent shudders down the spines of those who've heard it. In the small German town of Klingenberg am Main, Anneliese Michel was born on September 21, 1952, into a devoutly Catholic family. She was one of 4 sisters, and her father Josef had even considered training as a priest. As a teenager, Anneliese became increasingly religious, sleeping on a bare stone floor to atone for the sins of corrupt priests and drug addicts. But in 1968, when she was just 17 and still in high school, Anneliese began to suffer from convulsions. Court findings have her experiencing her first epileptic attack in 1969. It was then that a neurologist at the psychiatric clinic Wurzburg diagnosed her with grand mal epilepsy. Soon, Anneliese started experiencing devilish hallucinations while praying. She also began to hear voices, which told her that she was damned. The first unofficial diagnosis was made by an older woman who accompanied Anneliese on a pilgrimage. She noticed that Anneliese avoided walking past a particular image of Jesus and that she refused to drink water from a holy spring. The woman also claimed that Anneliese smelled hellishly bad. An exorcist from a nearby town examined Anneliese and concluded that she was demonically possessed. After 2 failed requests, the rite of exorcism was finally granted by the bishop. Anneliese was convinced that she had been possessed by several demons, including Lucifer, Judas Iscariot, Nero, Hitler, and Fleischmann, a disgraced Frankish priest from the 16th century. She also mentioned a few other damned souls who had manifested themselves through her. Anneliese's parents, Joseph and Anna, in 1975, convinced that she was possessed, gave up on the doctors from the psychiatric clinic. They chose to rely solely on the exorcisms for the healing. Anneliese endured 67 rites of exorcism over a period of 10 months, administered by 2 priests of the Catholic Church to free Anneliese of the 6 demons they believed possessed her. Over time, the ligaments in her knees ruptured due to the 600 genuflections that she performed obsessively during each exorcism session. A genuflection is an act of reverence consisting of falling onto one or both knees. On June 30th, 1976, during her last rite of exorcism before her death, too weak and emaciated to perform the genuflections on her own, Anneliese's parents stood and helped carry her through the motions. According to the autopsy on July 1st, 1976, Anneliese Michel succumbed to the effects of severe dehydration and malnourishment. At the time of her death, she was also suffering from pneumonia and a high fever. She was buried next to her illegitimate sister Martha at the outer edges of the cemetery. But the horror didn't end with Anneliese's death. In 1978, almost 2 years after she was buried, her body was exhumed and moved to a new oak coffin lined with tin. The exhumation was allegedly done because her parents received a message from a Carmelite nun that their daughter's body was still intact. Official reports stated that the body showed consistent deterioration, but photos were never released, and her parents were prohibited from witnessing the exhumation. The case of Anneliese Michel has sparked intense debate about practice of exorcism and the role of religion in mental illness. While some continue to view Anneliese's story as a tragic example of the dangers of unchecked religious zealotry, others argue that her possession was real and that the church failed her by not taking her demonic afflictions seriously. In the 2005 film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, only one of the characters, Father Richard Moore, was found guilty of negligent homicide surrounding the death of Emily Rose. In the real-life case of Anneliese Michel, which took place in 1978, there were 4 defendants, not just one. They were Father Arnold Rentz, Pastor Ernst Alt, and Anneliese Michel's parents, Joseph and Anna. All 4 were found guilty of negligent homicide and sentenced to 6 months in prison, suspended with 3 years probation. The trial attracted international attention and led to changes in German law regarding exorcism. In 1984, German bishops and theologians petitioned Rome to change the exorcism rite. They concluded that speaking directly or imperatively to the devil, that is, "I command thee, unclean spirit," was not necessary for a successful exorcism. Despite the changes in the exorcism rite, many still believe that the practice of exorcism is dangerous and can lead to tragedy. Critics argue that mental illness should be treated by medical professionals, not religious figures. Supporters of exorcism, however, believe that demonic possession is a real and dangerous phenomenon that requires spiritual intervention. While there is limited scientific evidence supporting the existence of demonic possession, there are also cases where individuals have reported experiencing relief from their symptoms following an exorcism. One such case was reported in 2016 in the Journal of Religion and Health, which described a patient with bipolar disorder who underwent an exorcism and reported a significant improvement in symptoms. The study acknowledged that the placebo effect may have played a role in the patient's reported improvement, but also noted that there may be a spiritual or religious element to the phenomenon of exorcism that is not yet fully understood. Some religious practitioners argue that an exorcism is a valid form of treatment for certain conditions, such as addiction or emotional trauma. They believe that by addressing the spiritual aspects of these conditions, a person can achieve a deeper level of healing than through traditional medical treatments alone. On the flip side, however, The potential harms posed by certain exorcism rituals that involve physical restraints, such as tying the person to a bed or a chair, to prevent them from harming themselves or others during the exorcism. This can create a feeling of helplessness and fear for the person undergoing the ritual, and in some cases has even resulted in death due to sheer shock. Additionally, there have been cases where exorcisms have resulted in physical harm or even death. In one such case in 1949, a young boy named Roland Doe underwent a series of exorcisms that reportedly resulted in him breaking free from his restraints and attacking the priests, as well as causing damage to the room. In another case, in 2010, a nun died during an exorcism in Romania after being gagged, bound to a cross, and left in a cold room for 3 days without food or water. Furthermore, the idea that a person can be possessed by a demonic entity and lose control of their own body and actions can be terrifying. The idea that there may be unseen forces at work manipulating a person's thoughts and behaviors can make the concept of possession all the more frightening. While some believe in the reality of possession and the need for exorcisms, others see it as a form of superstition or even abuse. This uncertainty and disagreement surrounding the topic can add to the overall sense of unease and fear. Anneliese Michel's story continues to captivate and horrify people around the world. Her case remains one of the most controversial and debated cases of demonic possession in modern history. Some see her as a tragic victim of religious fervor, while others believe that her possession was real and that her death was the result of a failed exorcism. Regardless of where one stands on the issue, Anneliese's story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked religious zealotry and the importance of seeking proper medical treatment for mental illness.
If you found these true horror stories fascinating, then you'll definitely want to check out 2 recent accounts from September 2024, where people have reported actual paranormal encounters. You'll see the video appear on the end screen in just a moment. And as always,
have a ghoulish good night.